The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Greg Reeves. I am part of the venture growth team here at Seed Invest. We have with us today Portalarium CEO and creative director Richard Garriott, who will be talking about the company's product, vision, and growth plans. After he goes through this presentation, he will be taking questions from you. So if you have any specific questions for him, please feel free to type them into the panel on the right-hand side of your screen. With that, Richard, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Greg, and hello, everybody. This is Richard Garriott, the CEO and creative director, as you heard, of Portalarium, and I'm very excited to be speaking with you today. You know, Portalarium is a team of highly experienced game developers, and we are planning to release Shroud of the Avatar later this year, and we're working with Seed Invest to raise the funds we need to expand from being a pure developer to tackle both development and the new role of being of publishing and supporting the live operations of Shroud of the Avatar. So I'd like to start today by taking you through the deck that you may have had a chance to look at this up on the Seed Invest site. Well, first of all, some fundamentals. The Portalarium team is based out of Austin, Texas, and if you look at our team, we have a team with long and deep experience in the gaming industry, and if you look at sort of the pantheon of games that we've created, I think that it's fair to say that our games have all tried to have and often contained a strong social element of bringing people together in these role-playing worlds that we've created. Many of the games have been highly acclaimed critically, with some of our team members and many of our products being in various halls of fame or receiving numerous awards. And of course, our current title, as you know, is Shroud of the Avatar. And if you think of Shroud of the Avatar itself, the first big note is that we're approaching completion. We have now completed most of the game's features. They're in, but of course they're still being polished. We have a highly engaged community. We have over 60,000 volunteer testers who have aggregated about 3 million hours, which is 30 years of gameplay that has gone into getting it to where it is today. We're very proud of our software uptime. If you look at the servers have been published, the whole game has been published monthly now for over 40 releases, and the software has had 100% unscheduled, has remained up 100% of the time outside of its scheduled maintenance windows for the past 3 years, while still in development. We think that's a very difficult thing to do for any online game, but especially for one in development. And we parse that very carefully to say software uptime, because we actually have had 2, I believe it is, hardware failures during this period, but the server code itself has actually been remarkably stable. And from a funding standpoint, we're also very pleased to be the second largest crowdfunded game in history, with over 11 million raised from the community that has all gone directly into the development of this product. And If you think about what we believe is kind of our sales pitch for the game, we believe that Shroud of the Avatar will once again transform role-playing games. That's something that if you look back at the role-playing games we've made in the past, I think people would believe that we've done that in the past a number of times. Some of the things that are unique about Shroud of the Avatar specifically is first how realistic, how real the world has been simulated. It's already now has hundreds of towns and adventure maps filled with thousands of NPCs and creatures. The economy is fully player-driven. Unlike most role-playing games where the game developers create the best gear that can be found in the game, in our game, all the best gear is actually crafted by the players themselves and then sold between them. We've tried to create a unique and dynamic combat system. Most role-playing games eventually degrade down to sort of this min-max process, it's often referred to, where you can easily mathematically determine what's the best gear to wear, what are the best moves to use, and in our case, we try to come up with something more interactive and a real-time basis to really bring strategy into the combat systems. From an exploration standpoint, something that's quite unique about the games that we develop is this rich sandbox that is sort of one of the icons of games developed by our team, where not only do you have a rich story to pull people through exploring the whole world, but while you're on those exploring the world itself, everything that you see that looks like it ought to interact, we try to make sure that we fulfill that promise and it does interact. So that's everything from musical instruments and doors and treasure chests to every kind of switch and pressure plate, and basically there's a visual clue to you that you would expect this thing to interact. In our game, we try to fulfill that. And even the NPCs you talk to, as opposed to just being menus that you kind of select between the kind of categories you want to talk to, you can actually type in text to our NPCs, and it will actually parse out of what you say responses that it might have to the various things you might ask about. And we think that, again, this adds up to a deeper level of exploration than you see in a lot of other role-playing games. And then, of course, as for people who are familiar with my past work and our past work, we have a very deep virtue story on top of this. It's actually getting deeper, in these last few months especially, where the players not only get involved in these ethical dilemmas, but the choices they make actually have impact both on their own future and various characters that they meet within the game. And one of the most unique pieces about this game, I think, is something we're innovating on we call at the moment selectively multiplayer. In most games, in most MMOs, everyone you can't really fit everyone into the same world. They have to segregate the players into shards. And of course, there's no real way to play solo player or offline in most MMO-like games. And with our new technology, we refer to again as selective multiplayer, everyone is both part of the same reality, as well as people, and the people by their own choice, or the game can choose to throttle up and down the game from being open in a massively multiplayer sense, or narrow down to a really solo player or even offline experience that people can elect to have. And the reason why we think that this is a particularly good market opportunity is because not only anybody on this call is already probably familiar with the fact that video games broadly has become one of the most dominant mediums, creative mediums of modern times. There's 1.2 billion active gamers globally. They're projected to have already created 100 billion in revenue last year. If you look at our team, we were not only one of the founders of one of the biggest genres within the gaming industry, the MMO marketplace, which on its own is already projected to have created close to 20 billion in revenues, and so we think that we are creating a game that is fitting into a strong marketplace. And we also have a fairly uniquely large and loyal fan base. Not only has our previous work been popular for many years, but Ultima Online was one of the first MMORPGs to surpass 1 million total players in its lifetime. Shroud of the Avatar, as I already said, is the second highest crowdfunded game and we've raised between 11 and 12 million in crowdfunds through Kickstarter and through our own direct website. And of the 64,000 pre-order backers, if you do the simple math of dividing the backers by the amount of money we've raised, that puts a lifetime value per backer at over $200. And so we think that shows that our backers are really dedicated to making this a success and to participating not only in the game as a player, but also as a contributor to its development. And that is also this kind of crowd-funded, crowd-sourced game that we're doing has some really innovative development methodologies behind it. In addition to raising money from the community, almost all the music was contributed by the community. Some of the art and even some of the code was contributed by the community. On the code, there's a couple of interesting examples. There's radios in the games where the code was originally created by the community, and most recently there is a mapping system that the community did one that was better than what we had originally planned ourselves, and so we incorporated that directly into the game. And part of this developing in the open is not only these monthly releases we do, but we have devoted ourselves to a very high level of transparency with everything we do being as soon as possible made available to the community. So every day our stand-up notes are posted to the public. Every week we give an update to the entire community. We of course run our forums and IRCs, and as I mentioned, in addition to the monthly releases, we do monthly Google Hangouts. We do postmortems in each release, and every quarter we give a very detailed schedule update where not only can people see the detail of what's coming next, but anything of the past that's been changed, we call it out and say, was this deleted, was it modified, was it delayed? And so players can see exactly how we are investing their money and building the game that we hope they will all continue to enjoy and get them a chance to comment on. And as far as a business model goes, we are doing a game that is both episodic in the sense of we're going to release episodes on approximately every year to 2 year basis, in addition to our monthly releases that we already do and will plan to continue to do after the first episode goes live. Right now, we're focused on PC, Mac, and Linux. And for those, for the nominal $40 base access fee, you get permanent full game access. We've also recently launched a limited free trial version that lets people kind of try it before they make that purchase. And then once you're in the game, we offer a variety of opportunities in our add-on store for people to buy a variety of things like vanity and convenience items, other kinds of clothing patterns, or housing opportunities if they want to invest further in the game. But we're trying to make sure that for those who are gamers on the line, that we're trying to avoid the pay-to-win aspects that can often run afoul of gameplay. But even after episode 1 launches, we do plan, we've loosely planned on 5 episodes initially. And in addition to PC, Mac, and Linux, we built on top of the Unity development engine specifically because it cross-compiled so well, not only onto these 3 that we're already supporting, PC, Mac, and Linux, but also eventually to console and mobile. We actually are, internally, we're fairly platform agnostic, and while today we have no development going on either console or mobile, in our long-term vision of our company, we do hope to revisit those, and we specifically have building code in a way that we hope will make that to be reduce the pain of making those shifts by building on top of Unity. And with each of the additional episodes, they'll launch in a similar way. There'll be a base fee to enter it, and then more upsale opportunities. And to talk about some of the team, you're of course already speaking to me. Some of you may know me by my nom de plume, Lord British. But in addition to being the CEO and creative director and having I've had a 40-year history in the game industry, starting back in the 1970s, frankly, even before personal computers, but my first published game was a Calibeth back on the Apple II. Co-founded Origin Systems with my brother. We did Ultima, Wing Commander, Crusader, and many other titles. Developed the entire Ultima series 1 through 9, as well as Ultima Online. Ultima is amongst, if not the longest running RPG franchise. And it created a variety of other firsts. Ultima 2 was amongst the first games ever in a box, the first games with cloth maps and trinkets. We coined through that series terms like the modern use of the word avatar, the category-defining term of MMORPG. And separate from the game industry, just a little fun fact here is I also happen to be an astronaut, the first second-generation U.S. astronaut. Another key team member to mention is Starr Long, known by his nom de plume, Dark Star. He's also a 25-year industry veteran, which means to me he's a youngster. But his first big claim to fame is Ultima Online. And while I get a lot of the credit for Ultima Online, because it includes the word Ultima, it really is Starr who built that team, led that project into being such a watershed event for not only the company, but I would argue the industry. It's amongst, if not the first real MMO. Coined the term rares and shards, which are now used very commonly in role-playing games. It was one of the first games to ever have player housing, to use a subscription model, and it's still operational today. It remains one of the longest-running games for MMO-type games in history. Between, as we've come together periodically for companies, he's also had a stint recently, just before Portalarium, at Disney Virtual World Studios. And Shroud of the Avatar and Portalarium have received quite a bit of good commentary down through the months and years from both industry press, things you can read these here, 10 Ton Hammer and MMORPG industry places you should expect to hear about us, but also in other general media, things like Forbes and Time Magazine, though they also have been following us with some anticipation, and we're obviously pleased about that as well. And so we hope this all adds up into something that you will consider seriously. We think that Portalarium, by not only having a critically acclaimed team with a Hall of Fame track record amongst its products and people, having a game that is now over 40 months of on-time releases and stable releases, the fact that we have such a highly valuable, very active and loyal fan base, we hope that you'll consider joining us in supporting Shroud of the Avatar's launch here in the second half of this year and accelerate our global expansion from, as I mentioned at the very beginning, being a pure developer into being a developer and publisher and an operator of a live gaming service. So anyway, that's the deck we have to produce to do. I'll pass it back to Greg, and I think we're going to open up for questions here in a moment.
Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate you taking the time to go over that presentation with us. Just quickly again, anybody who does have a question, if you joined late, please, you can go ahead and enter those questions into the Citrix Solutions box, the question panel, on your GoToWebinar control panel on the right side. But we already have a lot of questions rolling in, so I'm just going to jump right into them. The first one is, how is Shroud of the Avatar unique in contrast to its big publisher competitors, or maybe other competitors doing free-to-play type stuff in that space?
Yeah, so if you look at role-playing games as a category, and especially online role-playing games, it's interesting that most, I would at least argue that most developers have chased the biggest fish in the MMO pond, which would arguably be World of Warcraft, and before that, but if you think of World of Warcraft and some of these others, these are games that are primarily focused on combat, and your life in those games is about the level grind, and every player is first and foremost a combatant, and if they have other skills or activities, that is sort of their secondary nature. And what Ultima Online did, and what we have done as a team, and I would broadly say that the games that we've done in the past have all kind of had, is we try to build a much broader world, a world where many of the players who play, some are involved primarily in combat, but many others their whole lives are wrapped up in crafting, or their whole lives are wrapped up in role-playing. And so this, we believe we're creating a very unique type of role-playing experience that few, if any, other publishers have produced and are pursuing, and kind of gives us a unique competitive opportunity in the marketplace.
Okay, great, thank you. And related to that, when you're talking about these AAA FPS type games that you alluded to, I think people are used to a certain type of look for those games. Can you talk about a possible weakness with SOTA as far as is your game going to look as good or have high graphics like those games that people might be expecting from a triple?
Well, yeah. So interestingly, if you, as proud as we are of the $11 or $12 million of funds we've been, diligently and carefully investing of our backers' money on the creation of Shroud of the Avatar, that is a relatively modest budget in contrast to the top-selling first-person shooter games these days, which often have had hundreds of millions of dollars spent on them and hundreds of members on their teams. Much of that focused on the audio visuals of the game. And so we don't, what we did is we actually chose a different battle. So we decided we knew we were going to be taking on a much more modest amount of money. And so instead of choosing to compete on against the $100 million of art, we said we're going to compete on game design. We're going to do unique game design, unique gameplay, unique community activities and engagement that we can believe we can do with Shroud of the Avatar better than anyone else. But acknowledge that screenshot for screenshot, it's pretty hard to compete with a multi-$100 million first-person shooter.
Understood. Thank you. The next question is kind of a multi-part question. I'm putting together a few that came in from different possible investors right now. So, and I'll break it down more if you want. But what is the long-term plan for Portalarium? Are you currently working on any other titles besides Shroud? And then another related question: are there partner companies that might use you as a publisher instead of a developer because you're trying to pivot away from just pure development? So. I'll ask those in serial if you want to answer them one at a time as well.
I can. I think I can cover that here. So at this moment, Shroud of the Avatar is the one and only game that we are actively working on at Portalarium. However, and by the way, not only that will keep us busy through the balance of this year, but of course we then will continue to develop that in the live environment and the additional episodes. So that will keep something like the current team busy indefinitely. We would hope and think it might. However, that is not our long-term aspiration. So our long-term aspiration is to grow as we have our previous two incarnations as a company. Whether you look at Origin, which became part of Electronic Arts, or Destination Games, which eventually became part of NCSoft, we grew from just being the Ultima company or just being the Tabula Rasa company to being the developer and publisher of a wide variety of games on a wide variety of platforms, but all unified by a sort of a vision that in the Origin days we used to call We Create Worlds, sort of this deep, immersive role-playing worlds in a wide variety of genres and platforms. And so that remains our aspiration as a company. And so while at this moment, again, this is our pure one product focus, by all means, we do in the long term hope to partner both with other companies to help not only Shroud of the Avatar, but any other games we might work on sell to their maximum potential around the globe, but concurrently to have partners to help and work on developing other titles that we would ultimately be bringing out, under our label.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, let's talk about your investor exit strategy. So what do you see as your exit opportunities? Do you see a possible IPO on the horizon, or do you think more acquisition opportunities coming up maybe a little sooner?
Well, yeah. So as people have heard, this is the core of this team has now worked together. This is our third incarnation of working together, and so we are well aware of and sensitive to, and we're also all equity participants in this company, and so we are thinking very hard about how to monetize that for our investors and many folks on the staff. And so I think for us, we are trying to make sure that the development portion of our company, we want to keep Portalarium as independent as possible as a developer, but we do believe that there is a strong likelihood of a future that includes equity partners that could give current investors an exit opportunity. And while I think an IPO in the near term seems unlikely, as a single product company, and so we'd have to grow quite a bit larger, I think, before we'd really ever put that anywhere on a radar. But large partners seem strategic, both for the studio to maximize its success in global publishing, but also as well for our investors to be able to monetize.
Okay, thank you. It's a good answer. So the next question, I'm just going to caveat a little bit with a reminder that because of the regulations surrounding this type of forum, we can't talk about any of the deal terms with your raise. So we're not going to go into the size of the round or any of the types of security that are going to be offered. But with the understanding that there's a possibility the seed invest raise is unsuccessful, the question is, if that happens, will the game production end if the seed invest raise is unsuccessful, or do you have runway to continue other avenues?
Yeah, no. As we've tried to answer separately in other forums too, Portalarium has generally raised and spent similar amounts of money throughout its the development cycle of Shroud of the Avatar, and we kind of scale up and down based upon the kind of long-term trends of ebb and flow of finance. And so we believe that that we will carry on and keep working on Shroud of the Avatar regardless. What if we don't raise the funds through Seed Invest to expand as a publisher, it could affect our strategy for how to best release this game to the world. It will change our partnering strategy and how we bring the product to various territories and to help it kind of help get it marketed. We'll need deeper, more competent, sales and marketing partners if we sort of the alternate.
Okay, thank you. Understood. So you mentioned sort of your financing in the past, and one of the questions that came in is, does this Seed Invest campaign have anything to do with the original Kickstarter crowdfunding effort? How are they different, and why is Portalarium seeking additional investment? And basically, how is that going to help you become a publisher?
Sure, absolutely. So I think it's very important for people to know that the Kickstarter type of crowdfunding and what we've done on our website is a holistically different beast, different both legally and for a different purpose than what is happening now with Seed Invest. If you look at the non-equity crowdfunding we did with Kickstarter and our website, those funds that were all have been and will continue to be put into the development of the product, and so that is what has been helping us to build Shroud of the Avatar. And now what we're doing though is, now that we're the great news is that we can now finally see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're confident that in the coming months we'll now be able to release Shroud of the Avatar to the general public. People may know the detail of, we're going to be doing a story release here this summer, where the episode 1 story will finally be completable, but the main episode 1 quote launch will probably be later in the year, and so as we're looking at that, we're now going, okay, well now we need to hire new people, a new type of people, not programmers and artists and designers. We need to hire people in finance and sales and marketing to help manage the translations into various languages, to help manage distribution deals in various countries, and people to manufacture boxes, all these other kinds of activities that we had not been doing when we were only in the pure developer stance as a company. And so that's what the Seed Invest offering is for, is to help us expand beyond being purely a developer into being a developer, operator, and publisher of Shroud of the Avatar.
Okay, thank you. Actually, since you mentioned your story release coming later in the summer, we did have a user ask a question that came from your Q&A, I believe on the Seed Invest profile. And they were asking for clarification around what you meant with your response, which I'll just quote here. You said, "We will have a similar purge of storyline game state in summer 2017 at the start of the SOTA official story release to incentivize new players from our 200,000 registrations and others in the network, such as Ultima players, into Shroud of the Avatar." So it seems like maybe if you could explain what you mean by the purge of the game state, and how is that going to change for people that are already on on your
Sure, very good. And again, for people who are not gamers or not playing Shroud of the Avatar, apologies. This is a level of depth that will be may not be relevant to you and may be a little tricky to understand. But anyone who's playing the game, I think, will follow this well. Which is, when we started the releases 42 months ago, the game was not much of a game. In fact, you didn't have a character at all, or no customization to your character. There weren't really any NPCs in the game. The game was very simple. And so for the first 2 years of that, almost every release, or at least every 3 releases, we would wipe out the entire database. Every aspect of the data was wiped clean. And so if anybody was still playing, they lost their progress in the game, and they had to start completely over as a beginning character from scratch. Well, not this summer, but last summer, we did our final full wipe of the player database. So last summer, people did get wiped one last time, and everyone had to start over as truly a beginner, starting from scratch. Since then, we have done and plan no further database purges of that type. What we're doing, however, this summer is the first time where the entire game story should be completable. Meaning, if you follow the plot itself from when you get welcomed into the world and told to go find your first quest item, you should be able to start the plot from the beginning and meander through to the very end of the story. But since people have been in and playing over this last year, they have been playing in the broken version of the story while it's in development. And so the flags that describe their state as to who have they talked to, what have they found, what are they doing next, people who are playing over this last year might have some disagreement, some errors that have crept into that data for them. So what we've told people, and we've announced, and we're going to be doing here in July, we think July, is we're going to be doing the final story flag wipe opportunity. We're going to give people the option that if they wish to erase the status of their progress in the story so they can get a clean start and proceed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story. It will not wipe their character, it will not wipe their houses, it will not wipe any of their progress in any other way, shape, or form. We're just going to give them the opportunity, if they wish, to start with a fresh story to clean up any errors that might be there since they've been playing, since it was not really fully prepared yet. We also know from feedback from a lot of our players that a lot of players have been waiting till this time to play at all. A lot of players are going, I don't want to spoil the movie by seeing too many of the trailers. And so there's a great many players that are in playing but ignoring the story, or some players that have said, I'm not willing to play at all until the story is ready. And so that's why we think this is a big deal, that this final opportunity to wipe your story state is a time where a lot of people are actively playing. I think we'll find fun to start at the beginning and progress through. And a lot of people have been waiting and sitting on the sidelines until this moment to go start their character.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a really helpful clarification there. Let's move back to talking a little bit about the financials of the company. Can you talk a little bit about your current revenue streams and how you see the market and business opportunity from a financial standpoint in the future? And specifically, I wonder if you could address the current number of pre-orders that you have, and if you're concerned about development of future episodes, as you call them, if there's a large amount of users that have already pre-ordered your game. So basically talking a little bit about user acquisition and user growth there as well.
Yes, and so first of all, I think that for a crowdfunded game with absolutely, as close to $0 spent on marketing and sales as we have, we actually have already a notable level of success, all things considered. We have 200,000 accounts have been made, and those are people who signed up to play the game. We know that some of those 200,000 are probably dupes or may or may not represent real unique individual players. But we do know that 65,000 of those people have actually paid. And so those are the people that have actually, 65,000-ish of the 200,000 or so people that have signed up have actually made a contribution to the development of Shroud of the Avatar. We're obviously very proud of that. That's what's given us the ability to say we're the second highest crowdfunded game to date. And we think that that's a strong showing for where we are now. However, that's still a very modest number compared to not only almost any successful role-playing game out there, but our own games of the past. So our own games have in the past have nominally sold a multiple of that. And if you look at, so we think there's a significant upside. In fact, one of the metrics we do is we poll when we do go to a trade show and we're showing the game usually on somebody else's booth that we're piggybacking on top of. We poll people who self-select to come up and look at the game and say they'd like it and like to get an invite to play. We ask them, have you ever played an Ultima? Just are you familiar with our past work? And have you ever before today heard of Shroud of the Avatar? And even for people who self-select and walk up and look at it and go, hey, I'd like to play that, the majority of them, the vast majority of them, have never heard of Shroud of the Avatar. And so we believe pretty confidently from a number of these indirect metrics that we have a considerably larger potential market that we just haven't reached because we've never really done any significant outreach or marketing beyond the crowdfunding activities through our websites and social media. But to reach that, we need the sales and marketing team, and we need the sales and marketing funds, which brings us back to this moment. But if you just look at some hypotheticals, if we have 65,000 backers now, if you just move that up to something as small as 100,000, and you look at even a modest spending like people put into Ultima Online, which was generally about $10 a month, that's $12 million a year. If you bump that up to 200,000 players averaging $10 a month spending, that implies $24 million a year in revenues. And those kinds of numbers, I think for many role-playing games, including ours, are well within reach, and so are the kinds of futures that we're striving to make happen.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I think we just have time for one more question, and it's coming from a user who's wondering about the legal risks related with the fact that EA, who is a large game developer, owns the rights to Ultima-oriented content. So basically they're asking, are there any similarities with Ultima that present a sort of litigation risk from EA there to Portalarium?
Sure, we've of course think that through very carefully, and we've tried to be very careful not to do anything that could be considered use of any intellectual property that was within Ultima, or could be considered a derivative work, specifically of things in Ultima. Uniquely, the only direct thing we use are things like the name Lord British, which is not an EA-owned mark. That's a mark we control. And so, and other things we use, like the word Britannia, are things that are obviously clearly in the public domain. And so we've tried to be very careful to make sure that we mitigate any risk like that.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we're going to have for questions today, but thank you, Richard, so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Greg.
And thank you to everyone watching who asked such great questions. If you'd like to find out more about investing in Portalarium, including the terms of the offering, you can check out their profile at www.seedinvest.com/Portalarium. Thanks again, and this concludes today's presentation.